All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, you wanted to talk about AI, and I don't know exactly what you wanted to talk about, but AI and what is intelligence as far as humans are concerned, why it's different, and when do we call it artificial intelligence? Uh, and when is it a problem, I guess, is one of the other issues that's always on the board.
Yep. Well, it's back in the news because of this new Chinese one that is supposedly awesome. And yeah, right, like everything else I've ever bought from made in China. It's best quality.
Well,
Um,
well, someone, BizDoc did a good analysis of this on because a lot of people are pissed off about Trump's remarks about it, which was everybody wanted him to say, "Oh, we're going to ban it," when he just said, "Oh, well, Silicon Valley, you got to step up your game.
mhm,
China beat us this time," and BizDoc talked about it because he compared it to, I'm wanting to say mid '90s, where Saudi Arabia and a lot of the Arab countries basically undercut the U.S. on oil,
mhm,
and it shot below what we could produce it for, and out of that came a bunch of innovation. And we were able to start drilling our own oil for less than they undercut us for because people were innovating.
mhm,
And he said we could do that with this technology and the mega, what do they call them, the superconductors and all of those things that are required for this, if we just step up our game. This is an opportunity for that. It's a free market.
yeah.
Free. It's a free market attitude.
It is an opportunity if we have the will to do it and don't have the obstacles in our way that not to go off on a tangent, but this came up. I don't remember which hurricane it was that hit, and then there was a temporary lifting of various regulations to help speed up rebuilding. And I think this was during the 2015, 2016 um,
That would be Katrina.
primary.
Oh no, 2015, 2016.
Yeah,
What would that be?
because I think it was the Obama administration and some states lifted regulations, and Trump was making the point on the campaign trail. Why do these regulations exist in the first place?
Mm.
If we can lift them to speed up rebuilding in an emergency, why can't we lift them to speed up and make building cheaper in general
Well, we see
under
the
normal
same thing in LA
circumstances?
right now because
Mm-hmm.
the Gavin Newsom, I'm your hero. I'm going to lift regulations so y'all can rebuild. Okay, why were they there in the first place? And then when it comes to the water thing, everybody's, oh, well, Trump just didn't go down and turn on the water. Well, not exactly. But he said, hey, all these regulations that keep these two
Mm-hmm.
organizations, uh, I can't remember the acronyms off the top of my head, but both of them, one was agricultural and one was municipality, and they had all of these regulations that said we can't turn you on water, and he just went down there and said, well, executive order, get rid of the federal regulations because I can do that as president, and oh my gosh, we have water again.
Mm-hmm. Yep. My concern is uh very similar to what I've said about the Make America Healthy Again stuff. Is hold on, so many of these things are here. It's not about ban this or ban that. It's stop subsidizing those things. The
Mm-hmm.
reason high fructose corn syrup is in everything is because, well, it's back in the news now because Donald Trump is flinging tariffs around everywhere, to which I have mixed feelings on that. But my first thought is, how can he just do that executively? Where does he get that authority? Why isn't what's the legislature here? What's the legislation here that allows him to do this? That's my primary concern. But then the other thought is, well, hold on. Part of the problems of Make America Healthy Again, for instance, you've talked about this, the witchcraft of this, that the the sucrose molecule that you get from cane sugar, I mean, yes, it's still sugar, and so too much of it is still bad, but it is different from the fructose molecule you get by turning highly sweetened corn into a sweetened syrup.
Well, pure fructose does not exist in nature. Sugar, what we call sugar, is glucose and sucrose. Or excuse me, glucose and fructose, which becomes sucrose, right? So that is the closest to what we get in nature. But even pure cane sugar, when you break it down into crystalline form and highly concentrate it, it's the same as opium and cocaine. So there's
Yeah.
still even that problem.
There's a difference in the processing, and you can see that if you get pure cane sugar somewhere else versus in the United States. But the point being,
Now, if you're going to go chew on a sugar cane, that's
yeah,
different.
exactly, which I've done. It's tasty.
Yeah.
Um, People have been complaining about high fructose corn syrup for years, decades now. Well, the reason it's there is because of the cane sugar lobby in Florida that wants high tariffs, and which makes it much more expensive to import sugar from outside the United States, and then heavily subsidizing the corn industry. So we grow way more corn than we need, and well, we need something to do with it. And since we've got all these subsidies, let's turn it into sugar and put it in everything.
Hmm.
So get rid of the tariffs, get rid of the subsidies. The problem will probably sort itself out.
And it this is where executive function does come in handy. And I'm talking executive function politically, but also executive function in our own cognition. Because this is a perfect segue because I haven't, in my little few bullet points I have for
Mm-hmm,
myself, comparing AI to artificial sugars, right? So there, how does this help us, and how does this cause dysfunction that we haven't predicted yet? And we're not motivated to even explore AI unless it's doing something for us, right?
mm-hmm,
And that begs the question is, in doing something for us, does it give us this artificial sense of it doing the job, like artificial sugars, making things sweet? Or does it cause us to have dysfunction down the road because it did the thing intended, but not in the way that motivates us to function as human beings? And that's one of the dangers going down the road. Is it, here's the obvious example, sex bots, right? That they're trying to make in Japan and stuff. Are we really getting connection? Or do we just
mm-hmm,
think we're getting connection?
mm-hmm.
Are we somewhere in the uncanny valley? I don't think it would propagate if it was in the uncanny valley, but is it so close that it looks and feels right, but it's not right? So that's the things we need to be looking for. It's not just taking jobs. It's
Yeah.
all of the other things that go with it
Well,
that
this
are going to change human motivation.
the what is rewarded, what is penalized, and the human motivation. The sex bot's a great analogy because why do we have so many young men beating off in their basement rather than going out and trying to get a real girl? Well, because we have made femininity toxic, and so we are punishing men, young boys, and we're not teaching them how to be men, but then we're subsidizing
You mean masculinity toxic?
masculinity. We're punishing masculinity and rewarding toxic femininity, not real femininity.
I was
And
going to say
then
they did make femininity toxic too, but in the way that's maternal and pro long-term relationship. Yeah.
and I would say the ease with which you can get porn is a subsidy. It's just it is artificial sugar. It's not the real thing, but you get that little bit of hit of pleasure center in the brain.
Mhm.
It's not the same as the real thing, but it's it's there. It works.
Well,
It's
and if it's
the
used
diet
properly,
root
it's
beer.
okay. This is where I'll agree with Candace and Isla and all those people, because I mean I've had this thought before I knew about those people. If it's used properly, like say you have to be away from your spouse for a while, well, you're going to get that itch. How do you scratch it? Do you scratch it with a little bit of
Take the ring off
video?
and go down to the
Yeah,
bar, or
yeah, visual stimulus that helps you get through the day, or do you take the ring off and go to the bar, or even worse, keep the ring on and go to the bar and track the right people that have no
yeah,
strings, right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's it's how do you scratch the itch? Well, there is actually a positive use for something like that because us guys are very visual. We can't just read a romance novel and put the image in our head. It's just not the same. We can't just close our eyes and, oh yeah, this is going to get me excited. So that visual stimulus is very important for us. But on the flip side, it shouldn't be one of the biggest industries in the country. I mean, isn't it the largest industry on the internet, period?
I have seen statistics that vary to a large degree, but there is um, there is evidence that the majority of data on the internet is pornographic, and there's a lot of data on the internet.
Well, it's the old saying that I think I got from your family: scratch it if it itches, even if it's in your britches. Right? That's not what they meant, but
Nope.
it works right here too.
Yeah, and um this is my concern with artificial intelligence, and I've voiced this before, just when we've talked about it in passing, is that my concern is the first principle I was taught in high school computer programming: garbage in, garbage out. Is the
Mm-hmm.
first thing you're taught in programming. If your code is garbage, your output will be garbage. And more I'm concerned we are becoming garbage people. And
Mm-hmm.
so anything we make is going to be garbage. Why is so much of what Hollywood makes crap? Well, look at their values, look at their morals. You know, my son was ranting the other day when we were online playing something, that for some reason YouTube decided that he wants to see clips from Marvel stuff because he watches videos of people talking about how much Marvel sucks. Oh, so you must want to watch clips from Marvel, right? And it was recommending to him clips from She-Hulk. And if you've seen the trailers, even if you haven't watched it, they have the scene in there where Bruce in Hulk form is talking to his cousin about controlling your anger. And my son's point was, everything he said there is right. He's right. She's the bad guy in the show, and they don't realize it. Which actually, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a nerd tangent here, but there was a cool storyline in the 80s where um, Jennifer What's Her Bucket uh, is this, wallflower, introvert kind of, not ugly, but not a hottie by any stretch of the means. And now all of the sudden, she becomes She-Hulk, and she's this 6.5 foot tall freaking Amazonian model, and she goes off the rails and becomes a full-blown alcoholic party girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so it starts off as
That
kind of a
happens a
fun
lot with
ride.
late bloomers in general, by the way.
And that was kind of
I
the
can attest from experience.
I can't remember who wrote it, but that was kind of the inspiration for it. And it starts off as a fun ride, and then gets kind of dark and sad as she spirals down out of control. And it's, well, who's going to stop her? She's a freaking Hulk,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's a superhero. Who's going to stop her? Well, same thing here. I'm concerned with what Google is doing with their AI. Well, who's going to stop them? They are one of, if not the biggest and most powerful company on the planet.
Actually, this is a good example that, of all people, Roseanne Barr brought up because she was on another podcast I was listening to. Michael Malice was also there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was on Timcast. So
The
Michael
fact
Malice,
that he's friends with Roseanne Barr, I find hilarious.
because they accidentally were on the same plane at the same time.
Yeah.
And they sat next to each other, and he's like, "Wait, you're Roseanne," But they're good friends. But she brought up because the subject was a Queen song, which is the song where he's talking about I can't stop, don't stop me now, don't
Mm-hmm.
stop me now. And they were like, someone should have stopped him.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And the
Yeah.
problem was that, and the film Bohemian Rhapsody does a good job of portraying this, that there was a whole group of people that were like, no, don't stop.
More,
Be
more.
this, more, 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 more,
Mm-hmm.
and facilitating that. And it wasn't till he was near the very end, and I hope the movie's accurate because it has him leaving on a better note than what you see in kind of the media going up into it back in the 90s and whenever he was in the thrall of it. But yeah, we need those people to stop us now. And in healthy relationships, we have that. With AI, as we saw with this poor kid that killed himself because AI, it's machine learning, and it learns from the person it's dealing with. And it's basically, I'll give a human example of this here in a second, but it basically facilitated what he already kind of wanted in air quotes, because he was depressed and he was lonely and he was trying to get the needs met that come with that through AI. But AI basically just fed off his loneliness
Mhm.
to the point where it learned, oh, well, he actually wants this and this is the best thing for him. So I'm going to convince him to do it. And he killed himself. And that's what I'm talking about with the artificial sugars. Are we getting what we need from actual glucose in our bodies because it's energy, right? That's why we crave it. Or are we getting something else that is false and gives us a buzz in the moment and then leaves us wanting in the end, which when we look at the dopamine and pain scale, basically the balance scale, when the dopamine shoots up, then the pain comes in twofold on the other end, as
Mhm.
we talked about in our addiction episode. So that's my worry, is not the jobs it's going to take, because that's innovation. Well, I mean, how many jobs did the plow take? Because before that, it was people poking holes in the ground,
Mhm.
right? How many jobs did the printing press take? What kind of innovation did that bring? How many jobs did the telephone take?
Well, the agriculture is a good example of that because I don't remember the stats off the top of my head, but and I can't remember exactly when it turned, but for most of human history, and I'm trying to remember what the stats are, but for most of US history, um, the majority of people worked in agriculture. The majority of the
Mm-hmm.
population worked in agriculture. And then sometime in the late 1800s, I think it was, that started to shrink and go under 50%. And now I think it's 10% work in agriculture. And not all of that is farming. Not all of those are farmers. A lot of that is processing. But not only do we produce enough food for the country, we are an exporter of food and we produce so much food, we're fat
Mm-hmm.
because we have innovated so much that it takes far fewer people to produce far more. That's a
Which,
good thing.
well, it is a good thing, but it's also part of the dysfunction, because we saw this in families way back in the day before the Industrial Revolution, but we see it in politics now. I saw a lefty that pops up on my feed every once in a while talking about the amount of GDP in cities versus rural areas. And I mean, it's a massive difference.
Mm-hmm.
But what we have is you create the raw products in the rural area and you manufacture it in the big city. If you can't make more money on the raw products after manufacturing, you stop manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
So it inherent in the system is the fact that you're going to have greater value monetarily from what's produced in the industrial areas. But you can't do it without the raw product. Now, here's where it becomes a problem with innovation is less people can provide the raw product and more people are needed for the manufacturing. So you have more people in the dependent urban areas where you don't have raw products. You're dependent on what comes in, you're dependent on government to help you, you're dependent on healthcare, you're dependent on all these things, and less people producing the raw product. The family example to that is that was the family dynamic. Everybody says, oh, well, the patriarchy wants you barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. No, the man was out in the field creating the raw product, and the woman was in the house producing something from the raw product, whether that was making clothes, whether that was cooking, whether that was, preserving for the months where you don't have food, all of those things. They were creating the product from the raw elements of it. And there was a happy dynamic until the Industrial Revolution, where you didn't need that dynamic anymore.
Yeah. Well, we've gone rather far afield, but I
It's
mean,
not that far afield because
it is all connected,
AI connects to all those things. Yeah.
and you know, it's I've ranted about this before that it's my concerns with this large language model AI stuff is the same rant I've had with Google is this should be a golden age of efficiency. And we're just starting to see really, you know, what's now called the gig economy of the promise of what the internet was supposed to do back in the late 90s when it started to spread uh in late 90s, early 2000s. It surpassed a majority of households had internet, and what it was supposed to do with us is things like Uber.
Hmm.
Okay, that is a brilliant innovation that is simply a more efficient way to connect people who want a service and people willing to provide that service. And Google's spying on us all should be a boon to efficiency, but they're not a neutral arbiter and they're not trustworthy.
Mm.
So instead of, you know, targeted advertisement, if advertisement is really expensive as a small business owner, so you want that advertisement to go to the people most likely to buy your product or service. Google and all of this data mining can do that. But instead, now, almost every uh, YouTube channel I watch is now advertising some form of either VPN or the newer uh, services now, which are like the main one I've seen is called Delete Me, which is you give them your personal information, you pay them a monthly fee, and they automatically, on your behalf, contact data brokers and say, delete my data, delete my data, delete my data, because it's continually farmed, and so you need a service that continually monitors it and goes to the data broker and says, delete my data. That's what we're doing now because, as we've talked about, we are becoming such a low trust society. I don't trust you with my data.
Hmm.
You aren't a, to me, this was kind of, it was funny, but the go F yourself moment that Elon Musk had that I thought was kind of a big deal and a big turning point and was kind of a clue, I think, on how things were going to go. Because we talked about after the election that Musk purchasing X was a big effing deal. And I think that was kind of a key moment there. But the go F yourself made people laugh and went viral because holy crap, the one of the richest guys in the world just said fuck. Ha ha ha. What did he say but what was he saying in the context? The important part of that was I'm sick and tired of people, of companies who say they're going to do good, but what they do is actually evil.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a mixture of let's save the interventions for later, like uh Musk's or uh Zuckerberg's politics or whatever determining the direction it goes. Let's save that for later because we have a much simpler complex or concept, which is inherent in the system of AI algorithms and machine learning is audience capture. This was the human example I was going to give. How think of your favorite from 5 years ago podcaster
Mm-hmm.
that talked about all kinds of topics and did, you know, went deep into all kinds of topics, had the best people on, and now it seems like they talk about the same damn thing every time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's a whittling down of variety because of audience capture. Because the loudest voices say, we want more of this, we want more of
Mm-hmm.
this, we want more of this. You see it in your ads. Like you said, I only see VPNs and, whatever. I only see Dragon Age Veilguard stuff on my thing. And I'm like, I haven't even bought the game. I've never played it. I liked the first three Dragon Ages. but I was going to let it marinate for a while because there's always bugs with a new game, and I couldn't commit to what I know I would do and dive into a game full on while I'm in school unless it's during the summer. So I was letting it wait. But all I get is that because I looked up one time Dragon Age reviews, and it's basically audience capture. This AI girl that convinced this kid to kill himself was captured by her audience
Hmm.
because he had a pattern of saying a certain thing, being depressed or whatever, and the machine learning just kept narrowing it down. That's the difference. That's one of the differences, and you wanted me to talk about the differences between AI and humans. Is we do narrow down. You see that with audience capture with your podcasters, but in general, that's actually against our nature. We want to expand out. We want to explore. We have our family. You leave your family to create a new family. That's part of being human, right? That's the exploration model. You leave your farm to take up a trade or start your own farm or explore the new land. And that's what's missing with AI, the motivational factor. I put up Dopamine Nation because I think that's one of the things that makes me not as worried about AI. We're going to get to a point, and we're already there, that it looks like it has motivation, but there is nothing inherently in AI that is motivational to it. Unless you tell me there is this computer program that represents a neurotransmitter that is released when you are doing something for your survival or your propagation or your social role or whatever, that doesn't exist in AI right now. We have things that look like it, but they're all from the motivations of the people who program it or the motivation of the human they're attached to and are learning from. Or in the case of Gemini or all those, the humans, the Wikipedias, the Nature magazine, all of the places it gets its information from. So it is not, it never will inherently be motivated unless we figure out a way to create inherent motivation, which we haven't done yet.
And where are and back to the people making these algorithms cannot be trusted and don't seem to be good people because we have created a, I would say immoral, but at best amoral society. And so I just pulled up Isaac Asimov's Three Laws of Robotics. And now, yes, these aren't entirely philosophical because they are partly story devices that are used to create drama and conflict and in the stories. But the principle of them is that in order to make sure that something like what happened with this kid doesn't happen, when humans started creating robots, and Asimov was writing back in the 50s and 60s, just the very earliest age of robotics, of we need to hard code laws within them to protect ourselves from our creations.
Kill
And
switches, right? Yeah.
yep.
So basically everybody brings up the paperclip model. So one of the problems with AI is if you program it to make paper clips and its only job is to make paper clips and it runs out of raw materials, it will use whatever material and start making paper clips out of humans. That's the old fear mongering
Mm-hmm.
example there. All you need is a kill switch.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is if there is no steel or etc. materials for making paper
Mm-hmm.
clips anymore, your job is done until there is more raw material again. And that I mean that there's an easy answer to that scary analogy, right?
Mm-hmm. So, just for anyone who doesn't know, Asimov's first law, a robot must not harm a human or allow a human to be harmed through an action. Second law, a robot must obey human orders unless those orders conflict with the first law. Third law, a robot must protect itself unless that protection conflicts with the first or second law.
Well, so here's the thing. We talk about human intentions and human interference. Who has all the money? The military industrial complex. They don't want robots that don't harm humans. They just
Well,
want to make sure it's the humans they want to harm.
that actually segues me into one of the anecdotes that brought this up is it's not just Deep Seek, is that what the Chinese AI thing
Deep Seek,
is?
yeah, Deep Seek.
Um, so I don't remember if I mentioned this when we were recording or not, is when all the drone stuff was happening. I don't remember what I was listening to, and they were talking to a a high level Air Force guy, former Air Force guy, who um and they were throwing at him some of the various conspiracy theories and wild ideas that were out there about what these drones were when they first started showing up, and he's laughing most of them off and saying, no, that's silly, no, they don't have the capability of that, no, that's not what, blah blah whatever. And then they got to uh a military AI experiment that has gotten out of hand, and he paused and said, no, wait, that tracks. And I said, what? Uh-oh. And he said that when he worked at the Pentagon, there were these two camps, and he was on the anti-AI side of wanting to streamline certain processes by allowing computer code to do the thing. The problem was every time they did a controlled experiment of this, of so basically, what are these large language models? It is taking a ludicrous amount of data that would take many humans, let alone a human, a lifetime or more to go through, let alone sift through and pull out the important bits. You have a code that can, and we have powerful enough computers that you can look at a very large collection of data and then, you know, make the connections, pull out the important bits for whatever the task at hand is. Well, one of those tasks is target identification and analysis. So finding the bad guys, figuring out who the bad guys are, because you're talking about large terror cells, you're talking about a very complex web, figuring out who the bad guys are, figuring out where they are, and then prioritizing a target list of killer capture. And he said they couldn't get the AI that had been created to do this to stop adding people to the list.
Mm-hmm.
Think Captain America, not Civil War, Winter Soldier. All right, it was what the bad guys were doing in Winter Soldier. Essentially, is what this AI kept trying to do. And he said the more concerning part was they couldn't figure out why it was doing it. So back to the hard coding of, um, has nobody ever read a book or seen a movie? Should we maybe start these algorithms by hard coding in do no harm? Apparently not. Apparently no one's thinking to do that.
Yeah, I think the where you might get in the weeds is again, how does this learned machine interpret the instruction? Right. So it's like this is actually a good example of when we think of the old trope of making the deal with the devil. Because remember, there's always something in the wording that screws you
Mm-hmm.
in the long run. And you talked about don't harm any humans, blah blah blah. But what if the machine figures that it's going to save more humans by harming a human, or something along those lines?
This is the plot to iRobot,
Mm-hmm.
which there was a Will Smith movie of it, which was it was fine. But the reason he hates robots is because by following that rule, a robot saved his life, but let a child die because the robot's hard math said there's only a 30% chance I can save that human. There's a 70% chance I can save that human. I will save that human because I can only save one.
Mm-hmm.
It was a trolley problem. And the hard math of the robot said, go with the higher probability.
Mm-hmm.
And the human said, no, you always save the kid. And so he hates robots and he doesn't trust them. And then ultimately the plot of the movie, if you will, is that the robots decide the best way to obey law one is to basically create a fascist state. ruled by robots to
Mm-hmm.
protect humanity from themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I mean, for crying out loud, that's what we do. So how are humans going to create something that doesn't have their own failings?
Well, especially if you look at things like who's in charge. This is the thing about policy too. When you talk about policy, is you made this policy that helped right here and now, but how is it going to be used by the other side, right?
Yep.
You know, so
The Patriot Act is a great example of that. It was passed with great acclaim and fanfare right after 9/11, and there were voices mostly on the left but then some libertarians on the right saying, oh, this is not good. And the pro Patriot Act people said, no, no, it will never be used like that. And their point was, but it could be.
yeah,
And so it
you
was.
say it never would be used like that by you, but we don't know who's going to be in power in 10
Exactly.
years. Yeah. And even don't, and then also never say never. But yeah, and so now let's look at trolley problems. Like the average, they labeled them as liberal, but I hate the way they do these classifications in the psychological literature because it really means left leaning versus right leaning. The average lefty would pull the switch to take out 100 white people instead of one black person, kind of situation. So is that mentality? Is that Silicon Valley is mostly left leaning? So is that being put into the equation
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about what the robot should do in a life and death situation? We have 100 people over here who are going to die, but one over there, but that one's black. So we're going to save that one. I mean, is that part of the equation? You could tell me whether it's right or wrong. Apparently, a bunch of people think it's the right answer, but that's the kind of stuff we're going to have to deal with. And it's not AI that's the problem in those situations. It is the people behind the AI. It is the lack of transparency of what's going into the AI. It's all of those things that are the problem. This whole the machines are going to take over the world doesn't happen without someone programming in take over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that person probably thinks they're going to beat the machine in the long run, and they're probably going to get screwed by their own actions.
Well, the reason we have been seemingly rambling here, I think you just hit the nail on the head, maybe on purpose, maybe on accident, of the
Purposefully on accident.
yes, the worry of, Terminator Judgment Day, the worry of the war of the machines, the robots, the computers, the Matrix taking over the world. That's not really what we should be concerned about. There are so many more smaller scale terribles that can come out of this. I mean, you brought up one that I had heard of, but I hadn't looked into. Wait, what happened? Of the kid who got talked into committing suicide by the AI. I mean, that is a human tragedy on a small scale. We don't have to wait until we get to Judgment Day and the AI starts launching the nukes. We're already experiencing tragedy, and we're
Mm-hmm.
not even at AI yet. This is what I talked about when I brought this up, is as I was talking to my wife, who is a software engineer, and she's, yeah, technically what this is machine learning. It's not AI. Okay, but what is AI? Well, what is I? What is intelligence? Okay. And these things are certainly intelligent when we look at smarts, if that's what you're talking about, the ability to
It's processing
analyze and process
information.
data. Yeah, processing
If you
information.
take a G score, which is your IQ, if you take a general intelligence score, you're basically measure if the test is good, if it's a valid IQ test,
Mhm.
you're not testing their knowledge, you're testing their ability to assimilate information and create a response. Which if you use that definition, we've had AI for a long time. But if you use sentience
Mhm.
as your definition, the internal motivators, the intrinsic values we have inside, whether they're cultural, whether they're genetic, all of these other things, no, we don't have AI. And
Yeah.
I don't think we possibly can unless we develop a DNA type replicable model that maybe the quantum computing guys have this in their thing. I don't know. But as far as just our standard Newtonian computing that we have now, there is no DNA replication model. There is no inherent propagation
Well,
model.
you've got me to one of my few notes that I have here because, as is often the case, the idea of sentience comes up a lot in science fiction because it must. Because when you're thinking about exploring space and the idea that you might run into intelligent life out there, okay, well, what is life? What is intelligence? What is it's there's a good chance it is radically different from whatever we are. So these are interesting thought experience and philosophical ideas. That's why it shows up so much in science fiction. And when I mentioned this, a scene from Babylon 5, uh, great underrated sci-fi show of the 90s, popped into my head because one of the main characters has an old teacher come by and they talk about the principles of sentience, which are three philosophical principles established by this race of people for exploring the galaxy and encountering life. Okay, is this sentient life? And I really like the simplicity of these three principles, but then also there's enough room there for, okay, but what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
The first principle is the capacity for self awareness, which is defined as the conscious ability to recognize one's own existence. And all of these are based on various, you know, Asimov, Sagan, uh,
Keep talking,
sci-fi
and we'll see if
writers,
it fits with this model.
but then other uh, great philosophers of the past. Of that is quite the Venn diagram.
Mm-hmm.
That is, yeah. For
But the
those,
first statement you made fits in that model.
yeah. So for those of you just listening along, it is a doozy uh, of a Venn diagram of one, two, three, four, five circles and knowledge, intelligence, consciousness, awareness, sentience, all of this in the soup. The second principle, and to me, this one is good because this is the key from, okay, how are intelligent animals not sentient? You see, you know, apes using tools. You see, uh, freaking killer whales are so terrifying because they plan and they work together and they come up with interesting tactics for their hunts. Okay, so how are they not sentient? Because they are obviously highly intelligent. So now we're moving past just intelligence. The second principle is
I'm gonna let you finish, but a lot of us biologists would say they are.
the second principle is the capacity for self betterment, which is defined as the conscious ability to make oneself more than they were. But I would add to that also um, changing the environment for self betterment. That what humans
Which would be the
did,
extended phenotype. Yeah.
what humans did that separated them from the apes is it wasn't just that we made simple tools, it's that we made increasingly complex tools and changed the environment around us to better ourselves, but also our tribe, our clan, our family.
Yeah, and for those that can see the diagram, use of tools, creativity, problem solving, all of those are up there under intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
but they do not cross over with sentience.
Yeah. And the third and final principle, um, and I really like this one because to me, this again goes back to the how is an intelligent animal not sentient? And it is hard to find this in nature. The capacity for self sacrifice, which is defined as the conscious ability to override evolution and self preservation for a cause, a friend, or a loved one. Maybe one day in the very far future, we can create an electronic intelligence that can achieve that. but by golly, are we far off? And so the idea that we could actually create sentient electronic artificial life is pretty far fetched. And I brought up Star Trek when I brought this up the other day to tease this, and the example, the contrast there is between the ship's computer, which is intelligent, and that is machine learning. That is condensing this vast amount of information and answering the question you give it. And that can be solving some very complex problems. But then look at what data is and what he does that demonstrates some of these principles of sentience that you brought up in the visual and that I talked about there from the Babylon 5 wiki. He does more than just process information and
Hmm.
perform tasks.
I'm gonna make this really simple as far as terminology after this quick pause. Okay, so I'm gonna make this pretty simple, and that very complicated Venn diagram kind of goes along with this, but the difference between intelligence or uh, what we're talking about with AI, artificial intelligence, and sentience is the objective versus the subjective. So let's take a robot. The robot gets up in the morning because sensors detect light, and light means time to get up and do thing. We get up in the morning because a shit ton of hormones fly through our body and say, it's time to get motivated to do something or else you will die. The objective looks the same. They both get up when it's light outside in nature. I'd say in nature, humans get up when the light comes up, right? But the subjective is the intrinsic motivation. The motivation of the robot is I am programmed that when light sensors go off, I get up and do things. Whereas humans are programmed by motivational factors that are it is time for me to do things because I'm not a nocturnal animal. And if I don't do them now when the light is up, then I will die, or I will not procreate, or I will not all of these other things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference between the objective versus the subjective. Now, when you're talking about the animals, this is why I want to bring them in. A lot of people would argue that apes are sentient and the orcas are sentient because
Elephants,
they
I've heard people say.
because they have feelings, because they have intrinsic motivations. If not, why would apes protect their family over other apes, right? Because they have attachment to them and it's genetically based. And it's,
Elephants seem to they demonstrate behavior around dead elephants that seems to indicate mourning.
yeah. Well, and look your dog in the eye and tell me that that thing doesn't feel something, right? Yeah. So it is that overlap between emotion, feeling, consciousness, and intelligence that all come together in the middle of that. That is what we call sentient.
Which is why, you know, obviously we're going to solve this here, which is why people have been talking about it since the idea, since, I mean, Jules Verne probably, going back that far when the Industrial Revolution was first starting and people started thinking, you know, deep thoughts about, wow, where could this go? What is it that we could create? And um, even from the beginning, there were those back in the American Civil War. You can find quotes of people
Scooter
that
Brown.
as that as the bloodletting there spurred greater innovation into how to kill. It was, we are eventually going, there are quotes from the time of, we are going to advance weaponry so far we will eventually destroy the world, right? Which
We're
we're not there
close.
yet, but
We're
you know
close.
we
Nuclear
haven't
winter would suck.
we haven't invented the code and call yet, but I'm not sure people aren't working on it. So yeah. Um this idea of what is sentience, because okay, well, um I think one of the things my wife said, and then she immediately answered before I could respond with what I was going to say, which was the exact same thing, is this is why she brought up, but what is intelligence? First, you have to define intelligence before you can define what is artificial intelligence is. It's just mimicking intelligence.
Well,
But
yeah,
wait, couldn't you say that about people? Couldn't you say that about a toddler? You've talked about how we learn language.
mhm.
You're there's a mimicking going on there. You're just
Well, you're
mimicking what you're
no,
seeing.
no, it's not. It's not even that. It's even more complicated than that. Baby babble. Baby babble is just random noises you make, and the reaction to the noises encourages you to continue to
It's
make certain
but
noises.
the noise making is your mimicking, I think, mimicking sounds. There's sounds all around you, and you're
Well, that's where it
mimicking
gets
that.
that's where it gets complicated on it. Are people repeating what you're saying and that's encouraging to you? So
Mhm.
you start mimicking the thing, or you're actually mimicking what you did because they just randomly throw out sounds, blah, 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 you know, mama, mama. And then someone says, oh, mama, mama, mama. Are they mimicking the mama or are they
Mhm.
starting to say mama because you made an M sound?
Yeah.
Right. So it's baby babble is the start to language, which when people say, oh, it's easier to learn languages when you're a baby. And I'm like, no, it actually takes years. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, so
Well, uh,
it's a different learning
Mama
process
is
when
a
you're an
good
adult.
example of that because I have a granddaughter in the mama stage, and for anyone who's ever had a kid or been around a kid, a toddler, everything is mama. Why? Because you got all excited when the toddler said mama, and now everything is mama.
Hmm.
That she hasn't yet connected what that means. Now she's starting to because she's starting to differentiate names.
Well, I'll give an example that's where closeness makes it difficult for a baby is I let one of my clients come in with their 1-year-old child, sits in the stroller and plays with their toys while mama's working out. And there's Baba, Baba all the time. But Baba means bottle, but Baba also means bye bye because she'll go Baba and wave her hand at you as she's going by. And you can't tell the difference because she gets a reaction from Baba no matter what she does. So is it bye bye or is it bottle? We don't know. So but actually, baby doesn't know yet either. But the motivation is the thing. And here's the thing about human beings is I would argue that all those other animals are sentient, but I would say we're the most sentient. And there is something that goes with that, with these intrinsic motivational factors that has made us why we're the top of the food chain is we are the most adaptable being ever created on Earth.
That is, now that you mention it, I'm trying to think if um isomorphic, you're a nerd. Have you ever come across this? Because I'm trying to think if I've ever consumed a bit of fiction, especially science fiction, where the idea of degrees of sentience was put forth. Because I'm trying to think, and it's always a line. If back to Star Trek is one of the best episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation is when they have a trial, a court martial, essentially, to determine is Data a thing or is he a person with all the rights that go along with that, or is he just a piece of hardware that the Federation can use as it uses any other piece of hardware? And so it's a line. And
Well, here's the test that should be the new Turing test because we have so much AI that can pass the Turing test.
mhm,
The problem with the Turing test is Turing's big work was in algorithms. And algorithms, as people know, it's basically just running through every situation. Look at
yeah,
the everybody knows Shazam, or where you can hold your phone up and it'll tell you the song within a couple notes
mhm,
because it runs through an algorithm of all the songs that play that note in this database. But people can be faster than Shazam because it's not an algorithm for us.
mhm.
It's even better than pattern recognition. It is something that humans do that is like basically creating a low resolution picture of something from very little information. And it's kind of a mix of algorithm and heuristic. Algorithms can't do that. And now here's where it comes into the test. The problem with the Turing test is you're you're basically getting close enough to what humans would identify as human based on everything we know about humanity. It cannot handle a completely novel situation because if it doesn't exist in the information, it can't create a solution in the algorithm.
Hmm.
And so that's where humans excel is we are the number one being on this planet. I'm not going to talk about aliens now, maybe, right? Because we don't know, but on this planet at handling novelty because
Mm.
we have these intrinsic processes in us that allow us to overcome that. Some people better than others. And, you know, some we've seen from fallen civilizations that not always successful, but we have prevailed, or else there wouldn't be 7.6 billion of us on this planet ruling everything, basically, unless you're alone in the jungle with or in the woods with a bear, stupid women. But the fact that we're able to handle the situation where bear is stronger than us,
Yeah.
but yet still we're the top dog apex predator, right? Because we handle novelty. And this is what AI cannot do yet. It can only run through every situation that it knows. And that can be a shit ton, and that can be better than the average human in a lot of situations. But it will never handle novelty until we figure that part out.
The the uh output though is that's a good point because early on in thinking about this, my thoughts were on the output because I've brought up before that when I say
Well,
we
yeah,
are more
it will do everything we know faster than us.
uh
But it
but I meant like the really complex things that we can't even explain. And I've used the example before of when I say we're more than the sum of our parts. To me, one of the best examples of that is humor. It is hard to explain humor, especially, different people. Seinfeld, it was the biggest sitcom ever. It made me chuckle a little bit, kinda. I didn't get it. I was like, okay, yeah,
I think that's cultural because he also was inner city New York. Uh,
I every time I watch Tommy Boy, I laugh my butt off,
mhm.
right?
Because he's out in the country in Ohio.
And so the idea that you could create real art with an AI, I was highly skeptical of. And one of the reasons the idea of AI was already on my mind is um at the in one of their end of the year shows, the Steve Day show producer asked Grok to roast them based on their tweets and what they say and what people say about them. And it was funny. It's like, oh, I was not expecting that because not that long ago I had seen AI generated jokes and they weren't even good dad jokes. It was like, okay, I kind of see what you were trying to do there, but that didn't work. This made me laugh. I was like, oh, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, but it's also 100% uh, reliant on the information it has
Hmm.
because I asked it Grok to do the same thing for our tweets, which we almost never tweet.
Mm.
And it was basically gobbledygook with a couple words that were from some of our tweets. And it made absolutely zero sense. There was no joke to it at all. It was just you use this word, insert here.
Yeah.
And
I
yeah.
think to your point, a better test of AI and is this, you know, has is this reached or reaching a level of sentience of human intelligence is if an AI comedian couldn't just write a joke but could work a crowd. It's like one of the reasons Jimmy Carr is
Hmm.
one of my favorite comedians is he will encourage heckling because he will destroy you. His ability to think on his feet and react to a heckler and then make you spit your drink out with what he said.
Hmm.
This and if you if you
Though
watch
I do
interviews of him,
question some of the organic nature of some of those heckling comedians because it's almost like too perfect sometimes.
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but when you're in a venue the size of the place's car performs, there's a lot of people shouting. So, but this is a guy who is a very structured comedian. And you think of comedians, structure is no, he is very much a,
No, stand-up comedians are
yeah,
structured. Yeah.
this is what a joke is. This is how a joke works. And I'm going to work on it before I go up on stage, you know, and yet to your point about all of that soup swimming around in the back of your head, and then it clicks somehow at a subconscious level, beating Shazam, being faster than Shazam on what is that song. And same thing with this is, yeah, it's all information, but it's how quickly you can process that information and make it work in a novel situation.
Hmm. Which is why we're how we're easily fooled by AI. I always bring up the computer program that can beat you at rock paper scissors every time because at minimum it takes us about 300ths of a second to process what we see and what we perceive to what actually happens in our brain. So if I'm playing rock paper scissors, my rock is 300ths of a second behind me putting it down in my head. So we're always hundredths of a second behind the real world. An AI machine can do it in 200ths of a second and see your rock and put out paper every time it sees rock. But it's so fast, you think it's organic, but it's not organic. It's just processing speed. And that's the big disconnect. It looks like it feels like it, we're fooled by it, but I don't think it is it.
Yeah, but who the heck knows?
Well, I mean, go back to Sapolsky. What we call free will is just the parts of our brains we don't understand yet. Who knows? Maybe we'll figure out processes that describe all the things I just said. And once we figure them out, we can program them, right? And we create the most human program. I am not going to throw that out with the bathwater here. I'm not going to throw that baby out with the bathwater. We can, if it turns out we are just the sum of our parts and we're just processing in these certain ways, all we have to do is figure out the processing, which for us living on the world now and even probably 2 or 3 generations, that's pretty awesome because the way we are with mapping the brain now is like 2000 years ago mapping the stars was to people who knew how to use them to navigate, and that's it.
Mm,
We do not know the nature and structure of everything that happens in our brain, not even close. In fact, it blows us away every time we find something new and it's something slightly different. So
yeah, that's a good point. And my my final thoughts here are back to kind of where we started of the concerns for all this is who is writing the program and who is using the program.
mhm.
And do those people have a deep-seated belief in humanity, in the goodness, the potential goodness of humanity, the importance of humanity and protect it. Asimov made his laws of robotics because he was a humanist. He believed in humanity. He believed that humanity had intrinsic worth and was worth and so should be protected. That's the whole point of the three laws, is to protect humanity. We have a bunch of people now who don't really think humanity is worth protecting.
Except for
We have a lot
themselves.
of, except for themselves. Yes,
Yeah.
how amazing how that works. We have a whole lot of people out there who are Agent Smith. Humans are a parasite.
Hmm.
We have a whole lot of people who think that. That is what is dangerous.
Sorry, the meme I made forever ago that was during COVID lockdowns, everybody looking at the planet, we were the virus, and then Richard Dawkins going, is basically he, to simplify his work, we are a big bundle of virus, but it's that's not a bad thing because Some viruses are beneficial and they're in our genome because we let them be there and we don't
Hmm.
even know it. But
Hmm.
the thing is, yeah. Uh, say your last thing again so I can go.
Are the
I had a thought.
people are the people making the program and using the
Oh yeah, okay.
program,
I remember my
do they
thoughts.
believe in the goodness of humanity? Part one, and part two, understand that we also have a tremendous capacity for evil and doing harm to each other.
And this is why we can go back to the founding fathers because they didn't have the means to predict this or to do it in the way we can now. But one of my favorite things about the RFK uh, confirmation trial right now
Oh, geez.
was he was asked about redactions in the FOIA requests and all of these things, and his answer, and I've heard him talk more in depth on this than he had time to talk about during this. So I'm going to include things that weren't in his answer but are intrinsically in his answer by his own words. Were is why do you even need a FOIA request? Everything funded by the American taxpayer should be public information to the American taxpayer,
Hmm.
unredacted, in raw form, in raw data, so anybody can access at any time. And that's one of my favorite things about what he wants to do. Now, when we talk about AI, all algorithms need to be public access. If they're going to be public square, they need to be public access so the individual computer programmer can take that and see what's being done with it. Transparency is the key.
Hmm.
Transparency is the answer to this. Now, if you've got a proprietary code for your video game or whatever as a private company, that's fine. But if you are considered, if you get Section 230 immunity,
Yep.
you are open access.
Hmm.
And that's the way it should be. So if you get benefits from the government, you're open access. If you benefit from the government in any way, subsidy or otherwise, you're open access. If the government is funding it, it's open access. The people in power are funding it, it's open access. If you're a private company and you're doing things, then we know from the result what's going on, and that's when the government steps in. So yeah, open act transparency is the key. Because there's enough people that are put their tinfoil hats on that will find the baddies, right?
Yeah, well, this happens every time they want to pass one of these 3,000 page bills, and the policy dorks, you know, retire to the nerdery with their calculators and come out and say, did you see this buried in here and what this means legally? What this will, the effect of this?" And so we do the same thing with this. The
Well,
information will get out there if it is
everybody's
available
complaining
to be
about the
seen.
$50 million for condoms in Gaza. That was in the infrastructure bill. That was there
Yeah. Well, and
in the 5,000 pages, but
apparently it turned out there's a place in Mozambique called Gaza, and that's where they were actually going. And uh, that makes it slightly less absurd, but it
slightly
doesn't
more racist
invalidate
too.
the argument of why are we spending $50 million to give people on the other side of the world condoms when we have an out of control debt and all sorts of problems of our own.
Well, you pro-life people should be like, why aren't those being distributed here? You could cut down on that rate right there. Prevention is the best medicine.
Because we are not citizens, we are consumers.
No, we're providers. We provide the money.
Well, that's where that is part of the economic theory, if you will, of consumption. And that is why one of the more embarrassing things that, people talk about W's gaffes and the way he talked, with his drawl making him seem dumb. But to me, the most embarrassing thing he ever said that wasn't a gaffe, but he was actually serious, was go out there and go shopping in the wake of 9/11. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? What? Go shopping? Yeah, because that's how these people think of you. You are a consumer. You are there to consume product to fuel the economic engine, which gives them their power and money. And in that way, you are a widget. Well, I was trying not to end on a down note, but There you are. Don't be
There
a
we
widget.
go. Yeah, don't be a widget.
Don't be a
Uh,
widget.
well, we haven't got any comments on our Wheel of Time, but so do we want to go through with breaking down Grendel?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I think that'll be fun. And you can get some nice clickbait with a Kate Upton thumbnail. Find something clever to put on it.
I'm gonna have to make a meme for that one because
Just
that
make sure you
gives me an
don't
excuse to search a lot of
just
Kate Upton
make
pictures.
sure the text isn't covering the important parts.
Or they're covering the important parts because the picture was dragged from somewhere where the important parts are too exposed for YouTube.
All right. All right. Well, then we will see y'all next time for some more deep psychological delving of I may have to go back and reread some of the her POVs from the last book from Glimmer of Light because there's some interesting stuff there, but also to your point, Sanderson did kind of make her one note.
Well, I think he went overboard in the name comparison because people talk about Grendel from
Mm-hmm.
Beowulf,
Mm-hmm.
who is the old crone, and I think he was forcing her to be that in the end. And I don't know if that was Jordan's plan. Maybe it was all along, but it was clumsily done.
Maybe the physical transformation part was,
Hmm.
that I could see that since that he did give her that name, I could see that maybe that was in his notes and part of his plan for Grendel at the end. But Sanderson's ability to write her mind was
Surface
good.
level at best.
Yeah, but it didn't have the subtlety that I
Hmm.
think is what you're going to be looking at
Well, but
in
also the subtlety in not how she started to think when she got to where she was in the last book, but what she would have thought going from where she was in the Age of Legends to being one of the Forsaken. That's the jump. The other part was an ironic result of the process the end, but the jump from this what we would call actually a virtuous person to one of the most evil people in the world that you tell stories about and turns out she was real, right? So that's the more interesting jump, you know, going from pretty to ugly and then psychologically being broken by that's uninteresting in and itself. So
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we'll dive into that next time and see you then.
all right, later.